Hey guys, friend of the show, Shady Rays, has an exciting new offer for all you Passing Dimes fans. For the next 30 days, you can get 40% off when you buy 2 or more pairs of sunglasses. Just click the link in our show notes or on our Instagram bio to shop these awesome deals. Use discount code TEAM to get the offer. Shady Rays, live hard, we got you.
Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Passing Dimes. Another awesome guest here on the show. So she's a member of Team Canada's women's team. She represented us at the Pan Am Games. She recently resigned with her pro club in France, so we'll hear all about that. And she's from the great province of Quebec, so she's played Cégep, and she went to Sherbrooke University, so can't wait to hear all about that. Please welcome to the show, Kim Robitaille. Kim, thanks for doing this.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So let's get into it. What was your introduction into volleyball? Did you play in grade school? Was high school or club your first introduction? What made you choose the volleyball as your major sport?
Cute little story. When I started to play volleyball, it was actually in a private school. There was no club. It was really only between schools. It was around grade 7. So I had to pick an activity to play outside of the school hours, and then there was pool, billiards. There was volleyball with the team that was a year older than me, and there was e-games or stuff like that. And then I was like, okay, here's a challenge for me. I'm younger, those girls are way stronger than me. I was so little. I went to the first practice. It was so much fun. I loved the team spirit, and playing that sport was so, at the moment, difficult, but really a good challenge for me. So this is how I started. And what made me pick volleyball a little bit, it was because I think it was in 2002. There was the FIVB beach volleyball tournament in Jarry Park in Montreal. And you know those kids that help with the balls to give to the players?
Yeah.
So I was one of those kids. And I was so impressed by the players, the level. And I thought, oh wow, when I had the chance to play that sport, I jumped on it.
Awesome. And do you remember any players from those days? Did you really look up to maybe Annie Martin or any of the international players that would have been at the Montreal tournament?
Yes, I remember Annie Martin and Guylaine. And I also remember, I was a big fan of the Brazilians. So Ricardo was there at the moment. There was also Paula. I can't remember the last names, but yeah, Ricardo and his partner was the big thing for me.
Nice. And we just had Mike Sleen on the show, and he was talking about the Labatt Tour. And with you growing up in Repentigny, he said that was probably one of the best crowds on the Pro Tour, if not the best one. So what's the volleyball community like there? Obviously, I think you're a little young to remember the Labatt Pro Tour, but with volleyball being so popular there, how was club volleyball or school volleyball? It seems like a sport that a lot of people are into, right?
Yeah, but I think it grew up through the years, because honestly, I can't remember a lot of schools having clubs and having that program for players. I remember the challenge of Repentigny. I was so young, but it was the event of the year. So there were so many people. The crowd was amazing. And I think when it started, there were international players that were there, but I don't know for what reason there was a new rule or something happened between FIVB. I was so young, can't really tell. But it just got to the Canadian players. So we lost the international players in that big level. But yeah, that was the event of the year, and it was so much fun.
Now, one thing we learned about Quebec when we had Sarah Jean on the show was she talked about how competitive high school volleyball is, where maybe different than, say, Ontario, high school might be as competitive or more competitive than club volleyball. Did you feel the same experience when you're kind of growing up and playing at a higher level?
Totally. So there are some schools that you play as a student athlete, kind of. So you're into a program, and you, so let's say when I played for Les Cyclones, you were in the same class as your teammates and the boys team as well, but there were no athlete student in those classes, and that made like the program really, really strong. And I guess it's the same in every school that has this type of program, because you're always with your people, you're always with your teammates, and that creates a really, really strong bonding. And I guess you can see it on the court after.
So with that being the way your classes were designed, did you cover a lot of sport content? Like, did you maybe get a head start more so than other athletes your age who grew up elsewhere, where maybe you guys talked about nutrition or strength and conditioning a little bit more because you were all athletes in the same group?
That would have been a really good idea. I can't remember really well. My souvenir is not that good. But I think it wasn't there yet. So it was more we had the regular classes that everybody had, but it was the group together that was different. Nice.
And when you just finally decided to play post-secondary, what went into your Cégep decision? Because that's something, again, we've talked to a lot of Quebec athletes that going to Cégep before you go to university. Did you make it based on a school decision? Was volleyball going to be a big part of your decision? Like, how did you decide which one you wanted to go to?
It was a big part of my decision. So let's say in between grade 8 and 11, I surfed between middle blocker, opposite, and setter position. And then that coach from the Nordic came to me and said, "You want to try the set and be and be really specific to it." So I went into his practices with the older girls, like the Cégep girls, when I was like grade 9, I think. And it was a big thing for me, but it made me feel so comfortable. And from there on, I thought, okay, I should just go there. Just feeling comfortable for me was enough, let's say. I knew it would be like a lot of driving because it was far from my house. I think it was 45 minutes away from my house. And I didn't stay in the residence? Is it the word?
No, you got it.
Cool. So it wasn't a big decision for me to take because there were not that many schools that recruited me. But I knew from then, Danik, the coach that is still there, coaching there, was really a good coach. Would be a really good coach for me.
So with you coming through high school and club and then Cégep to university, was there a point that you knew you wanted to play professionally or for the national team? Like, at what point did it kind of convince you that you could play at the next level and wanted to do this for a living?
I never really knew I wanted to do this. I loved volleyball. I loved playing with a team. And the moment that I thought, okay, like from Cégep, I could play university. I was at a game with my dad. It was McGill against Montreal, Carabin. And I was watching the game, and I turned to my dad and said, "Dad, I think I can play that level." And he answered me, "Well, Kim, you're probably the only one that didn't see it before, like that didn't believe that you could do it." And from that moment, it stayed on my mind, and I decided to reach university. At the end of my Cégep, there were many universities that wanted to recruit me, and I picked Sherbrooke. And from there, I loved the sport so much that I thought, what is the next challenge for me to become better? But before, no, I was more like a year-to-year player.
That's so cool to hear that you're at such a high level, but even you were challenged with confidence a little bit. So with everyone around you knowing that you were obviously a very skilled player, but you may have not have felt that, how have you dealt with that now being a professional player? Because I think that's a cool lesson for everybody to hear, that even growing up, you weren't the most confident in your skills. So is that something you've worked on, or was there a moment it finally clicked? Like, how have you kind of faced this challenge so you could play at the highest levels like you are?
It's kind of funny because even today I'm like trying to deal with this kind of stuff because I'm not the typical international setter, let's say. I'm watching Brie, I'm watching Megan. I love how they set, but I'm not like them. And I think like even this year I got some reflections on like my career, what happened before, and how did I make it like to this point, and realized that it's okay, like the type of player that I am, and yes I am different, but I can still do a lot of good stuff and have fun and inspire people, even though like I'm not the typical type of setter, you know.
Awesome. So you mentioned a little bit about your recruiting process. So the province of Quebec, the RCQ, I think is very competitive. And obviously there's some standout teams. I don't want to list everybody because I might forget somebody, but what really separated that you wanted to go to Sherbrooke versus like some of the other top schools that are in the province?
There were some points that was necessary to me, like to know that I was going in a team that felt like a family, and at the moment Sherbrooke, it was a big thing. Like it's a city of students, like it's packed of students. It's a really small city, but there was also Montreal that were probably like at it was probably like 6 or 7 times at the nationals, and then Montreal was really strong also at the moment. But I picked Sherbrooke because there was no setter on the team, and it was like a spot for me to feel and to see, can I help them? Can I make a difference? They were not really winning at the moment, and after this first year, I thought, I took the good decision, because we finished first of the pool of the regular season, which was a really, really big thing. I think when it happened, it was the first time in 4 years, but it was really fun. Like it felt like a family, like having those varsity sports always supporting us and us supporting them. It was fun.
And before the show, I reached out to a friend of the show, Sarah Jean, just to kind of ask what it was like playing with you. And hopefully she doesn't mind me sharing this part, but she mentioned she was actually intimidated by you in the beginning because of the intensity you brought. But then she got really comfortable around you with how not only intense you play with, but how much joy you have, like the way you would celebrate when your teammates score or when someone's doing well. So do you share that opinion of yourself where you like to be intense, but when it's time to celebrate or really build up a teammate, like that's something you're pretty gifted at?
This is so funny. She's so right, because I grew up so much through the sport and through the years. I think in Cégep, I was so hard on my teammates, and I could like yell on them, and it was like, today I can tell this is so bad. But I'm really proud of the type of player I am today. I can relate, like it could be really, really intimidating what's the word?
Intimidating, you got it.
Intimidating, yeah, thank you. and I realized that like this is not exactly the way that everybody works, and I also realized that you can connect in different ways with players. There are players that you need to shake them and yell on them, but there's also another one that you need to support her and encourage her. But I'm glad that Sarah liked the way I was at some point, but really happy that I worked it out and where I am today.
Awesome. And just for our listeners, just to clarify, you're French speaking, including your studies and when you're at home. So we're very grateful for you doing this interview, because we wouldn't be able to talk about you if it had to be in French, because I'm just not there. So thank you for doing this in English. I know you're maybe choosing words are maybe a little challenging at times, but like I said, you're doing well, and we couldn't have done this without you attempting an English interview. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for helping me.
One other thing I wanted to follow up with what Sarah Jean said is just the toughness you brought to practice. And apparently there's a funny story that you trained with a scarf on one practice because you just refused to take it off, or maybe it was a training camp or something. But again, just to demonstrate how tough you are, can you kind of give us a little hint about what that story was all about?
So that story, that's really funny. I kind of forgot about it, but we were in Winnipeg, I guess. It was really cold. It was a winter camp. And I started to feel really, really bad. And I I got not the flu, the cold. I started to feel it coming, so every time I was breathing, when you breathe in a cold atmosphere, it's like really painful for your throat. So I needed something in front of my mouth to breathe, and my coach was out of his mind, couldn't support that. He thought this is so shame, and he said, well, if you cannot train, don't train. And I wanted to train with the girls. I wanted to be there. I'm okay, I'm getting sick, but I can still push a little bit. And then the same evening, couldn't sleep, had goosebumps, I was sweating, I was not feeling good, full fever. And but it wasn't, right now it's funny, but at the moment it was not.
Oh, I'm glad you didn't get kicked out of practice or anything like that.
Oh, that was so close though.
So just to build on your earlier point about being tough on your teammates and intense and demanding, do you think that's something that setters have to be based on your position and kind of encouraging but demanding your teammates around you? And did you ever think that you took it too far and that's a skill that you had to work on?
Yeah, I think the setter position is really important for that too. I think Bree said something about it. We need to feel how our teammates are during a game or during a practice, and it's always our job to step to the hot hand, but also if we feel that somebody is not pushing for the team or is not involved like she is normally, how can I connect with her to help her to be more present with us? And I think there's this one story about, again, being really intimidating with a girl. It was first my last year in Cégep, and there were rookies for the next season that were with us for practice, and apparently I stopped the practice, and I was like, what is happening? Can we play? Can we do something good? Because this is shit. I was so mad, and but from that moment, I think, from that point, it got better. It got really better. But today, that girl is my friend, and she keeps saying that was not a good thing when we met. She didn't have a good opinion of me because of that. But today, it's all good.
So when you finally had an opportunity to try out for our national team, kind of the things you've talked about, did you feel like you had a chance to demonstrate your unique style, but also could you be demanding in a room full of other elite athletes? When you went to a tryout, were you encouraging and demanding too, or was that hard to do with new players around you?
Yeah, the first year I tried out, so it was the FIVB tryout, but let's jump to 2016. I tried out for the national team. It was an AB senior team, and Lupo was still there. And I thought it was really, really hard for me first to join a mostly Anglophone group. I wasn't used to speak English at all, and so first when we say that a setter needs to connect with the players, I couldn't really do that. And then learning the fast tempos that in Quebec, it wasn't really a thing. And even today, we're still trying to speed the game, but it's not there yet. And I couldn't see myself being so demanding around a Carla Ricci, a Shanice, or those big players. At the moment, my friend Marie-Alex was already on the team, so she was there during tryouts. And even with her, I felt so little, in this situation, and I think I was still young. And it's 2 years after that I could, after a pro season, that I could be more myself and know what is the requirements for the speed, for the location, or even know a little bit more about the game and be able to ask for it.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good point you bring up where we haven't really talked about it on the show very much. And Sarah Jean kind of hinted when she first moved to Toronto, even sometimes the drill explanation, she wouldn't quite understand what was being expected. And you kind of touched on it there that being around mostly English speakers. So how have you kind of dealt with that challenge? Because I think that's something that on top of trying out for a team, learning a new system, a new style of offense, that even if the language is different, that just adds another layer of something else you have to be challenged with. So how have you kind of either adapted or overcome this as you kind of progress through the national team levels?
I think this is one of the points that helped me with my patients, to be really focused on what is the drill, like what they are requiring from us. But when I couldn't understand, so it's like a new language, and also there are new words that, like a volleyball language that I wasn't aware of because it was in English. And I remember like a few times asking to Shaina or asking to Max is Marie-Alex, to just explain me the drill again, or asking to a player, hey, can I follow you through that drill? Because I didn't really get it all. Being involved with the national team and starting to play pro, it helped me so much with the language because it was almost a full year of speaking that language, speaking volleyball language in English, and connecting with my players in that language as well. But before that, it was really, really hard, and I kind of needed to watch movies, and listen to podcasts in English, and to help me go through it.
Wow, that's just such an extra layer to deal with that obviously somebody growing up in Ontario or BC where a lot of the national team athletes are coming from, we don't have to face. So that's exciting to see how you've kind of accepted the challenge and worked through it. With you mentioning that when you first tried out, Lupo was the coach, and then I believe Marcello was there when you first entered, and now with Tom there, have you felt a change every time a coach comes through the national team? Like, are they always trying to install their system, and there's just maybe a different mood around the training environment?
Yes. So being with Marcello, it was his second year with the team. So the girls were already aware of his system, and they knew what he was asking for and how hard we had to work. And I saw him, I saw him the first tryouts. It was a no in 2017, but then 2018 it was a yes. And just to say about Lupo, I just saw him for the try. I just had him for a tryout, so cannot really say much about him. But for Marcello, it was the big European style, and he was asking a lot from us. We were not used to that, but as a team, as a group, we made it work, I guess, supporting each other a lot, and making sure like we had enough like food, and being like, if somebody felt like more fatigue, we were trying to help her out. And it wasn't a really easy summer for my first summer with Marcello, but I can say that after that summer, like, I could work with any coach first, but also like he showed us what is hard work. We in North America, it's not really that vision that coaches have, but for sure we grew up in that, and we learned a lot from that. And now with Tom, it's a whole different vision where the vision is to progress and get better every day, and that connects a lot with me. I love to learn, and maybe it can take me, like, I can maybe put too much emphasis on learning instead of just like playing, but getting better every day with Tom and with like the staff that we have is, to me, the perfect combo and perfect vision for this group and this country.
Yeah, just a couple of questions on Marcello before we move on to Tom and the current coaching staff. I've never seen him in the training environment, but just watching on the live stream and seeing how intense he is in timeouts and huddles and things like that. With you being an intense player, did that kind of help you, or was he almost more intense than we've seen in the Canadian system? Like with him coming from Italy and having such a strong volleyball background, it seems like his style was to yell and be very intense. So did you kind of thrive in that environment, or was it just, like I said, more over the top than maybe we see in a lot of Canadian coaches?
You know, I think a lot of us thought that we could like deal with it, but it got so, it was every day like that. So even if it was not a game, it was the same in practices. So the thing that we that a lot of us thought is that we're so much under pressure during practices that we will be ready for the games. You know, we're always like, we know that if we make a mistake, we're gonna run, or we're gonna like, he demanded so much from us. Yeah, so I think that made us really strong mentally and ready for anything.
Nice. And you mentioned with Tom and the new coaching staff coming in that there's just so much learning going on. So was that something you felt you were pretty strong at with like the growth mindset that he talked about? Or did you kind of have to adopt your style and start doing like journaling or more video or more meetings? Because in speaking to like Autumn Bailey and Jen Cross and some other national team players we've had on the show, like he really brought in a new system and new ways of doing skills, where even Autumn, who's a great player, started to doubt her own skills because she had to learn like a new way to do things, right? So as a setter, which sounds like it's Tom's, top position with what his role was with the United States and what he's doing in the NCAA, how did you kind of deal with like all this new information coming at you?
First, I felt really behind, even like you said, so Autumn or every girl felt behind and not like a good player. It was from learning to set, learning to serve, learning to block, everything. And it went to footwork as well, like how many steps for an outside hitter needs to do after passing or after not passing. It was really specific because he's a geek, right? He's a really good volleyball knowledge person. I think every day repeating that our focus should be on getting better and getting better, we started to believe it, and that even after that little bump of not being good, we would be really good. And I think this is what happened. So putting everything together from Marcello, like this hard work, to getting better with Tom, getting that volleyball game to the next level, I could see that team going really far.
Nice. That's good to hear. So you mentioned like footwork and obviously hand positioning and all the stuff that goes into the finer details of setting. So with you, Bree, and Megan and some other setters being involved, how much room was there for you to be an individual and have your own style? Or are you all doing like identical footwork? Are you all like penetrating from serve receive the exact same way? Is your hand position the same? Or how much can setters really be an individual and have their own kind of technique?
I think you can put your personality out there very easily. Tom is easy and loves actually to see who you are. After that, I think to learn the basis, we all needed to repeat the same and the same and the same. During the game after that, he's really open to the decision you make, like who's going to hit the ball. And after that, like there's always a feedback loop, like why did you take that decision, or what did you see, or I think there's a big opening that can go around that, at least if we talk about it.
Awesome. And one thing I remember about Bree being on the episode is she talked about she really felt like she could become a leader with being a setter, where she could tell hitters they were late, and even if it was like a vet on the team, she felt confident enough. And she even phrased it where if she wasn't going to be brave enough to speak up, then why was she there to set, right? Like it was part of her role on the team, and that made her more comfortable being a leader. Did you experience the same thing when you first entered the program, or be honest, was there a time that if Jen Cross was late, would you tell her? Like, would you kind of let the vets know that you needed more from them, or how have you developed as you've been on the team a little bit longer about being demanding and really taking like a leadership role as a setter?
always tried to do it, because I felt like, okay, this is my second year. I can agree that I'm in the team and this is my spot. But obviously, like the beginning was really hard, and even like when there was this new system, they were learning how to how to go to the ball. I was learning how to set them again. So we were trying to find a balance, but also like, is the coach approving what I'm saying, or am I wrong? So it was just trying to find a balance where this ball is what we want, or not. And after that, we could communicate better.
Nice, and this one might be a little tough to answer, but one thing that I find is really exciting with the women's team is you're all training in the same place. Like this summer, I think we had A, B, and FISU all in the same building, but one thing that can be challenged for the coaching staff is when they name a roster for an event, the mood might change a little bit, right? So how do you think that changes the environment a little bit where, for example, you were named to the Pan Am Games team? Do other people look at you different, or are they slighted, or is it still like a supportive environment? Or same thing, like if you're not named to the Olympic qualifying roster, do you still show up to practice and work hard? Like how has the program kind of managed those tough situations where you can still be, disappointed maybe your name wasn't called, but still happy for the person beside you and you still want to work hard to make the team better?
Exactly. So this is the perfect point that you said. So when you're not named on the roster, example for me, it was called really early. I had a meeting with Tom, and he said, you know what, we want to send you to the Pan Am Games. So automatically I was thinking, okay, so I'm not going to the qualifier. At first I was really sad, and then when I knew it, it was probably like 2 months prior the Pan Am Games, and I thought, okay, how can I make this team better? How can I help the players that will be around me at the games? But it's really, really hard to be rejected, always. After that, it's how do you stand back into the game, go back to practices, and they're all your friends, so you're there with your family, and how will you help them to get better? Always. That should be like the first thing. What is your role and what you can do to improve for this team?
Nice. And looking at the Pan Am roster, there was a nice mix of younger athletes and some vets. So how do you feel like that team kind of came together and performed? Because like I said, there's people who've been on the team for a few years, and there was some people who may have been kind of early in their Team Canada career. So what did you guys do to bring everybody up to speed so you're ready for a major games like Pan Am?
It's really interesting. I love, one point that I loved when I came in the team for the first time during Marcello years, it was how this group was communicating a lot. How did we express ourselves about the practices, how we were feeling, how can we get better, what is our goals? That was a meeting that we got really early into the summer, and I think being on the same page put us on the same level, if you know what I mean. Even though there was Kyla, Jen that had a lot of experience with the team and also pro, just talking between each other, and they made us feel like it was our spot, and we are on the team as well.
Nice, and I think it's always special to represent Canada, but to do it at a major games, I think adds to the experience. So what do you remember about that, whether it's the opening ceremonies or how busy the event is with all these other athletes going around? Like, what were some of your first impressions of being at Pan Am?
It was a huge tournament to start. That was my first thought. I was amazed how beautiful it was to see so many athletes from different countries, let's say at the lunch area. But also, I think our first game was against Peru. It was the national anthem, and it was a sold-out game. So the Peruvian people are so lovable and also really nice to be around. And when they sang the national anthem, for example, it was so loud, couldn't hear the person next to me. But also you could feel this energy in the gym, and you could only smile from that, and use that. And from that moment through the whole tournament, let's say for that fan aspect, they loved Canada and they were always cheering on us, even if Peru was not playing, and that felt so good. For the rest, it was such an amazing experience to be in a village with different athletes, and you could have access to anything, be with your teammates anywhere, but also there was this gym where you could work out with all the athletes again, and you could see the different cultures. It was, very memorable.
Awesome. And going to a major games, like I said, can be pretty special. And I look back at Canada games, and I may have mishandled this, where I think, like you said, there's so much stuff to do where when I got there, I felt like you had to be dialed in and you had to be focused on winning. But that takes away from, like you said, the dining hall or being social or maybe watching other teams' events or going to a different sport. So how, as a high-level athlete, did you deal with those situations? Were you kind of dialed in and focused on winning, or were you trying to really take in the experience and then, obviously closer to game time, you would start to dial it in? But how did you kind of treat the event and everything that comes around your sport and all the distractions with it?
So I think it was a good balance between we are there for one thing, and it is to win, and give a really good performance. During the tournament, we were together, taking care of ourselves with the physio and the physical strength and conditioning trainer. And yes, all the girls had their mind into the tournament, and after the games, after the tournament, when the volleyball part was over, we could really take the time to hang out and take advantage of those facilities or watch other games. But during the tournament, it was really volleyball.
Awesome. And one thing we always like to do with setters is just kind of pick their brain on how tactical they like to get. So you mentioned you have a unique style. So when the game's going on, what are some little things you like to do? Are you big at looking through the net? You mentioned paying attention to who has the hot hand on your team. So how do you keep them involved but not oversetting them? What are some little things that go into setting that you really enjoy and like being strategic or tactical with kind of the game within the game?
So early in my career, I learned to play with the block. So if there's a tiny movement from the middle blocker happening, how can I screw his game? How can I make it one-on-one? So that is the thing that I love to do. If I can put my hitter one-on-one and she can score a really, really awesome set, I'm like, okay, I did my job. After that, how can I keep everybody involved but setting the hot hand? There's also good moments to set the middle, for example, but I love to watch video before the game a lot to learn the patterns of the middle blockers in front of me, and how can I still keep my outside hitters and opposite involved a lot without overloading,
Awesome. And we were really lucky to get Brett Walsh on the show, and he talked about his coaches kind of had to limit how creative he was, and they kind of agreed on this 80-20 rule where 80% of the time he was going to stay within the team system and really execute the game plan, and then there was 20% where he could be wild and crazy and do all this creative and fun stuff. So again, with you having this unique style, do you find that you're ever limited with how creative you want to be, or do you feel like you have full permission from the coaches to kind of, like you said, create one-on-one, set the ball fast, look for options through the net, do all the little things that you really enjoy?
Yeah, I think during my career I got really lucky. So the coaches that I worked with gave me more a 60% freedom to do what I want to do, and 40% strategy, the game plan. So that gives me a lot of room to get creative. when it's not working or when they see something. So let's say in Quimper with my coach, we agree, and I love knowing that I'm not alone in that and that we are a team. So if there's something that I don't see and that he sees, to tell me right away, and we're gonna make it out. We're gonna make it work. So I got really lucky for that compared to Brett, I guess.
Now, what advice would you give to a younger setter? Because I'm sure once we're back in training, there's going to be a few younger listeners who are going to say, well, Kim Robitaille gets to do this, so why can't I? So when you're running into 5 and you set a C ball off of 1 foot and you're kind of spinning, like, obviously younger athletes are going to want to try that. But what are some things that you did really well to kind of get this permission, I guess, from coaches that you could be creative? Because I imagine if you were being wild and crazy and it wasn't working, they would really tell you to tone it down, where it sounds like you have a green light to do whatever you want, but there has to be some execution or some points earning that goes on with that, right? So what do you feel like are some things that younger setters need to have before they can just be wild and creative and really have fun with it?
I guess not being a tactical point, but more a personality point. You want to be open to what your coach says. He's there to help you. He's not against you. And he's always trying to make you better. So take the advices and try to apply it to your game, because it cannot go wrong. To me, that would be the best advice.
So with you not only playing for a national team, but also playing overseas, do the demands change with every coach you have? Like, is the system really changing everywhere you go? Or are there some things that maybe you bring to the team that they help kind of change their system to what your gifts are? Like, when you go overseas, are you setting the same style that you do for Canada?
No, I think Canada is one of the teams that probably plays the faster in the world, honestly, because we are not so tall and we're trying to beat those big blockers, you know. But in pro season so far, I got really, really tall hitters, let's say, where the fast set is not really working. I didn't play the high levels in first divisions or stuff like that, like in Italy or the big leagues. But the hitters I had to set were more like a high ball-ish type of hitters. We're trying to, let's say in Quimper, we're trying to put a little bit more fast balls because we have smaller hitters, but it's not as fast as the national team.
And have you ever felt like there's a lot of expectations on you when you go to your pro club? Like, you not only being a foreigner, but playing the setting position where you're contacting the ball so much. Have you ever felt pressure to perform, or have you had a good experience at every club you've played at?
There is always pressure, I guess, for a setter, knowing that it's the brain on the court. Like, the coach is the brain, and you are the brain on the court. Trying to apply what he says. But having this really good support of a coaching staff is something that helped me through the years. For sure, there are less good experiences for my position that I had, let's say, in Germany. But overall, it was a good pressure and a good team. Like, I'm always saying I'm a team with the coach, and we're going to the war then.
Nice. And kind of looking at your career, you've played at 3 different clubs. So when you first started this process, how did you decide what agent you wanted to go with? Like, were there other athletes on Team Canada that helped guide you through this? And then how did you choose to accept your first contract, and then kind of lead us through what leads to switching clubs or returning to a club? Because I know you've only played a few years, but you do have a lot of experience with kind of negotiating new contracts or playing in new countries and all the little things like that.
Yeah, so how I got involved into pro was because of Kaiva Mateusz, which is a middle blocker from McGill that I played against. She was the contact that I had to get an agent, you know. My agent is Joris Koistra from the Netherlands. We got a really, really good connection from the first second that we talked, and I felt really comfortable and confident to work with the guy. And then it was for me to get a first pro contract, because during university or during my Cégep year, we didn't make it often to the nationals, so didn't really have a name out there, and I had to make my way through all those really good setters. So my first year was in the Netherlands as well, not the big league, but a really good league for, let's say I could compare it to the FISU team that we had in 2015. And after that, I made my way through, so I had a really good season there. The coach was really gave me a lot of freedom to do what I wanted and to grow at the same time. And then after a good season in the Netherlands, made my way through to Germany. Didn't happen what I expected, but then ended up in France, which I'm really happy because it was the first time I could speak French. It got really easy for me to connect with the players, connect with the team, connect with the supporters, with the fans. And I think that helped me to have that was my best year, I think, so far, like overall volleyball and also outside of volleyball.
Now, help settle a rumor. We've heard this a couple times, and me not being a French speaker, I can't comment on it, but is there a difference between French-Canadian French and France French? Like, do they ever make fun of your word choice or your accent or any little thing like that?
Yeah, I finally knew. That's so funny. I finally understood what they meant by we have a weird French accent. Our French is their grandparents' French. So sometimes the words that I picked, they start to laugh at me, and I'm like, why? What's wrong? For example, shoes. We use a different word for shoes than they use, and it's always like, oh, my grandma said this, and like, okay, fine, I'll be your grandparents if you want.
Okay, so it is the same language. You just speak like a slang version of it, it sounds like.
Exactly.
That's so funny. So
they understand.
Awesome. So you mentioned with you not having like a youth sports championship or experience like that to get a contract, so you kind of had to climb the ladder there. But one thing that's special about you, I guess, is you found a club that you want to stay with. So how did renegotiating go with? Because I don't believe you signed a 2-year contract with them, right? Like you're on a 1-year deal, but they chose to retain you?
So, yes, I signed a 2-year contract with a clause because we are in the second division, and the big goal was to go back in first division. And then there was this COVID thing that happened, unfortunately, because we were first in our pool. We were really on the good way to get that first position spot and then move to the first league. The clause in my contract was that if we don't make it to the first league, I'm free to go. However, I thought, okay, what is the safest decision for me to make with the situation, and what am I looking for next season? Because do I want to go for money, or do I want to be in an environment that I like? And there was a lot of thinking for that, because I never experienced it before. Like, I really, really appreciated my season in that city and the people involved in that club. It's so familiar, like it feels familiar, but there's also like this really big crowd and good support from the city, which you don't see in a lot of clubs in France, let's say in second division for sure. So yeah, I thought I was really lucky to be into that, and if the coach and I have a really good relationship together, so it was, I think, the decision to make for me.
Awesome. And kind of give us an example of what training looks like, because having some other pro players on the show, it seems like it's hit or miss sometimes with how much coaching you'll receive or how involved the team is. So how often are you guys training? How much are you lifting? Do you live with another foreign player? Do you live on your own? Like, what are some little things that make your situation special that you enjoyed it to return to the club?
The coaching, even though we were a second division team, the goal made it like a first division team. So because we wanted to go first division, we had a full schedule of workouts and trainings. So every day was 1 to 3 workouts, depending on if it was like in the morning, a workout in a volleyball technical skills practice, or just volleyball. And then we had like some afternoons off or morning off before the day before a game. But we had really like a 6 days on 7. There was we had something on the schedule. After that, about the coaching style, depending on what is the knowledge of the coach, yes, it's not the same as on the national team. Like, you're more by yourself and working on what you can improve, because we already know what we have to improve, or what we want to work on. So yeah, there's less coaching and more performance asked to do during a pro season, let's say.
Nice. And tell us about the city or the town you're in. Like, is it a big center? Is it smaller population? Like, you mentioned you have a good fan base. Are people recognizing you when you're out for dinner? Like, how intense do these fans get?
I don't get recognized when I go for dinner, so that's good. That's an aspect that I really like. Like, I can walk in the city, do my thing, and enjoy like the weather or whatever. The city is a small city. Quimper is a small city. But the good thing is that it's recognized for the people. The people are really nice there. Like, even in France, the French people would say that Quimper or the La Bretagne is the place to go for vacations, or to relax, or their second houses over there. We're surrounded by the ocean. Like, there's so many, not beaches, but places to visit, like 20 minutes away by car. Like, everything is so beautiful, surrounded by nature, which is similar to Canada. So yeah, this is a big part that I like. It's so easy. It's a small city, but people and being close to the water is a massive point.
Yeah, that sounds great. So I know we've taken a lot of your time. Just a couple more questions. Anyone who has you on social knows that you and Marie Alex, are playing some backyard volleyball and doing some other things. But is the national team involved right now? Are you guys still meeting? Is there some virtual training going on? Like, how are you kind of dealing with this stoppage and still feel like you're either engaged in volleyball or even improving in some ways?
Yeah, we stay really, really connected with the national team. So every day we have this group conversation going on. So we are under the national team right now, working out with the strength and conditioning trainer, and we have those plans for those programs for every day. Almost like 6 days out of 7. So we keep ourselves busy with that, and we have some meetings, Zoom calls, which are really, really interesting and keeping us on track.
Nice. And with you and Marie Alex playing twos mostly, are we ever going to see you at a beach tournament?
Oh, not for now. It's only for fun, you know. But it could be like a really cool dream, but we'll see.
I had to ask.
Yes, beach volleyball is so fun.
Oh, awesome. So we have taken a lot of your time. Like I said, one thing we're trying to make a tradition on the show is just to tell a funny story. So hopefully people who weren't familiar with you before realize that you've played at a high level and you kind of grew your confidence and have made the national team, and now you're playing professionally, but some funny or odd stuff still happens every once in a while. So I was hoping you could share a funny story before we let you go.
Okay, so a really fun story of me is that I made Team Quebec just the summer before Cégep. and the coach at the moment for the team was my Cégep coach. I was going in Cégep the summer, like the few weeks after, and we go to NTCC after 2 weeks of training. And just before tournament, I'm paired with Katia Fortier, which is a great setter, great person, and my confidence was not really high at the moment. And I went to my coach just before the tournament, and I asked him really seriously, Danik, can I be a libero? You know, like I want to play. Can I play another position? Because I know I'm not going to play. And he started to laugh, and he's like, Kim, don't worry, like everybody's going to play into that tournament. And I felt so bad, like just because it's going to be my coach, and I'm like not showing a strong mindset right now. And it just stayed, you know. I thought that I would be better as a libero than a setter into the competition, but good thing it got better through the years, and I'm fully aware that I can do the job today.
That could have been way worse, where if he would have laughed and said, no, there's no chance we're letting you pass.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. So glad to hear that you guys are still involved and S&C still going. It's too bad your season was cut short, but exciting that you'll be back next year, and sounds like you got a lot of good stuff to go on, and really easy player to root for. So thanks for taking the time to come on the show.
That was awesome. Thanks, Josh.